Somewhere in the driest desert on Earth, someone drew a hummingbird the size of a football field, and then a spider, and a monkey, and a condor with a wingspan of 400 feet. They scratched these figures into the ground by removing a thin layer of rust-colored pebbles to reveal the pale sand beneath. The scratches are barely a foot deep, and they are only visible from the sky. These are the Nazca Lines, over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 animal figures, spread across 300 square miles of Peruvian desert. They have survived for 2,000 years, and no one knows for certain why they were made. The lines sit on the Pampa Colorada, a flat, windless plateau about 200 miles southeast of Lima. The region receives less than 1 inch of rain per year. The air near the surface barely moves. The pale subsoil, once exposed, hardened with morning moisture into a natural seal. That is why these lines survived. The desert preserved them the way a tomb preserves a body. The Nazca people, a pre-Columbian civilization that flourished from roughly 200 BC to 500 AD, are the most likely creators. They were master potters and weavers known for polychrome ceramics decorated with the same animals that appear on the desert floor: spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys. But knowing who made them doesn't answer the harder question. Why would anyone create artwork that can only be fully appreciated from 300 meters in the air, in a civilization that had no way to fly? In 1940, an American historian named Paul Kosok flew over the plateau and began the first serious study. On June 21st, 1941, the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, he watched the sun set directly along one of the lines. He called it the largest astronomy book in the world. A German mathematician named Maria Reiche heard about Kosok's work and came to see for herself. She never left. For 40 years she lived on the plateau. She measured every line by hand. She mapped every figure. She argued that the spider represented the constellation Orion, that the monkey represented Ursa Major, that the entire desert was a vast astronomical calendar. She died in 1998. She never fully proved her theory, and a statistical analysis later showed that the lines had no more astronomical alignments than you would expect from random chance. Then came the water theory. Anthropologist Johann Reinhard proposed that the lines were sacred paths leading to mountain deities who controlled rainfall. Hydrologist David Johnson went further. He mapped underground aquifers beneath the plateau and found that many of the lines and trapezoids trace the routes of subterranean water. The animal figures might be water symbols: the spider, rain; the hummingbird, fertility; the monkey, the Amazonian forests where rain is born. If this theory is correct, the Nazca Lines are not art. They are a prayer for water, drawn by a people living in one of the driest places on Earth. And then there is the theory that made the Nazca Lines famous worldwide. In 1968, Swiss author Erich von Dã:Niken published Chariots of the Gods. He looked at the long straight lines crossing the desert and saw airfields, landing strips for extraterrestrial spacecraft. He pointed to a figure on a nearby hillside, a 30-meter humanoid with a round head and what appears to be antennae, and called it an astronaut. His argument was simple. The lines are only visible from the air. Therefore, they were made for someone who could fly. And since the Nazca people had no aircraft, someone else must have been watching from above. There is a problem with this theory. Von Dã:Niken described the lines as smoothed and cleared like runways. They are neither. The surface is rough desert pebble, and one of the photographs he used as evidence of a modern airport was later identified as the knee joint of one of the bird figures. But here's the thing that Dãpas. Niken got right, even if his conclusion was wrong. The mystery is real. These figures were designed to be seen from altitude. The hummingbird's proportions are mathematically precise, only when viewed from above. No raised platforms or hills exist near most figures. The Nazca people created something they themselves could never fully see. In the 1980s, experimental archaeologist Joe Nickell proved that a small team with wooden stakes and string could recreate the geoglyphs at full scale without any aerial assistance. The method was simple: scale up a small drawing using a grid system, mark reference points with stakes, connect them with cord, remove the pebbles along the lines. It works. The mystery of how is solved, but the mystery of why remains open. The most recent discovery came not from archaeologists, but from artificial intelligence. In 2024, researchers trained an AI on satellite imagery of the plateau. It found 303 previously unknown geoglyphs in a single study. Some of these new figures are small, only a few meters wide, and depict scenes of decapitation, human sacrifice, and figures holding severed heads. These are not astronomical markers. These are not water prayers. These are images of violence and ritual, drawn in the desert and left for something or someone to see from above. The Nazca civilization collapsed around 500 AD. The leading theory is that they deforested the surrounding valleys to grow crops. When El Neomplazo struck, the bare hillsides channeled water into catastrophic flash floods. A people who drew a map to water ran out of water, and the desert swallowed everything except the lines. The lines survived 2,000 years of wind and silence. They did not survive the 21st century unscathed. In 2014, Greenpeace activists walked onto the protected site to lay a banner near the hummingbird. Their boot prints may last as long as the lines themselves. The fragility is staggering. The lines are only 10 to 30 centimeters deep. A single truck driving across the plateau could erase a figure that has existed since before the Roman Empire fell. And yet they endure. 2,000 years of stillness on a plateau where the wind doesn't blow and the rain doesn't fall. A civilization's last message, drawn in the only medium that would outlast them. What were they saying? We still don't know, but whoever it was meant for, they made sure it could only be read from the sky. Next, in the Ancient Mysteries of Peru series, we travel to Sacsayhuaman, where stones weighing 200 tons were cut so precisely that a razor blade cannot fit between them, and no one knows how. Subscribe to Universal Paradox Studios so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, do you think the Nazca Lines were made for the gods, for aliens, or for something we haven't thought of yet?